Well, welcome to the 700 Club. We've got an exclusive interview with former President Trump. And the question is, what would keep you from running? Not will you run, but what would keep you from running? We've got that answer in an exclusive David Brody interview. But first of all, the budget. A civilian climate corporation, free community college, probably the payoff of all student debts. These are just a couple of big-ticket spending items that have Democrats splintered. Deep divisions in the party have forced Nancy Pelosi to walk back the vote on a $1 trillion infrastructure bill today. And on top of that, Congress has to raise the national debt ceiling or face catastrophic consequences. So why won't Republicans vote for it? And what must Congress do to keep the federal government from shutting down? Dale Hurd explains it all.
The vote on a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was supposed to happen today has been pushed off until Thursday because Democrats admit they don't have the votes. Speaker Nancy Pelosi Sunday had to walk back today's planned vote on the bipartisan Senate bill for roads and bridges.
Let me just say we're going to pass the bill this week.
But she doesn't have the votes so far.
I'm never bringing a bill to the floor that doesn't have the votes.
Because House progressives in her party won't vote for the roads and bridges infrastructure bill without an agreement on a $3.5 trillion so-called human infrastructure bill, what some call a wish list of big government programs, including things like a civilian climate corps and free community college, paid for by raising taxes on corporations and the wealthy.
The Build Back Better agenda is not some crazy agenda that just a few people support. It's actually the vast majority of the Democratic caucus.
And progressives are threatening to tank the bipartisan roads and bridges infrastructure bill if Congress can't pass the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
The votes aren't there. We have to get to that reconciliation bill first.
But moderate Democratic senators like Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona have said they won't support a human infrastructure bill that big. And even Nancy Pelosi is conceding that the massive bill will be cut. Joe Biden still thinks he'll be signing the bills this week.
I'm optimistic about this week. It's going to take the better part of the week, I think.
But there are more pressing matters for Congress. The government runs out of money Thursday and is also set to default on its debt without an increase in the debt ceiling. GOP Senator Pat Toomey told CNN Republicans would vote for a bill to fund the government, but not if it's linked to a debt ceiling increase.
I will certainly be voting no if the Democrats insist on combining the debt ceiling increase or suspension with the continuing operations of the government.
If the debt ceiling is not raised, the government could default on its debt. But Congress has always raised the debt ceiling in the past. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, there's no question about it. We've got to pay our bills that have already been incurred. The government can't default on its debts. It can't do it. So this is a nonsense debate. But the big thing is Americans say, okay, we know the bridges are cracking. The roads need help. There's a train that ran off the track a few days ago in Montana. There are all kinds of things that need help. Specific, that is specific infrastructure, and there's agreement to buy it. It would be a good thing. It'll make jobs. It'll do good stuff. Beyond that, this other thing is fluff and nonsense, and it'll destroy our country, and it can't be done. Our Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson is here to tell us what lies ahead. Abby, what's the timeline on these votes to keep the government funded?
Well, as Dale pointed out, this is an incredibly high-stakes week on Capitol Hill, with both Biden's agenda hanging in the balance and these two major financial deadlines. So the Senate is going to take the first vote tonight on the House-passed continuing resolution that also includes that debt ceiling raise. And as Dale mentioned, Republicans are not on board with this bill if it includes the raising the debt ceiling. And Democrats need 10 Republicans to vote for it in order for it to pass. Now, the government is set to run out of money on September 30th. And so they have to pass something by then in order to keep the government open. And as we are all aware, we are in a pandemic, and a lot of people have warned there will be grave consequences if we see a government shutdown right now. But the question is, Republicans will support the continuing resolution if Democrats remove the raise to the debt ceiling. Republicans want to see Democrats raise the debt ceiling on their own, which they can do without Republican votes through the budget reconciliation process. Republicans argued that Democrats have control of the House, Senate, and the White House. They don't want to support this. They believe raising it will just lead to more spending from Democrats, and they don't want to be a part of it. So they're pushing them to do it on their own. But procedurally, if Democrats, once this bill tonight is likely to fail, is there time for two new standalone bills to pass both the House and Senate by September 30th and prevent the government from shutting down and keep funding open at least through December? That's what we don't know. So after this bill tonight, that, as I said, it's likely not going to pass the Senate, it is very unclear what lies ahead in the next couple of days to keep the government open and avoid this debt ceiling crisis. So we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Abigail. You know, isn't it incredible that this wrangling goes on in Washington, but it is so destructive to the future of our country. That's what's so bad. Well, let's go now to our CBN News financial editor, Drew Parkhill, for more on this deadly. Drew, everyone knows that failing to raise the debt ceiling would be a disaster. What's behind it all?
Well, you're right, Pat. And as Abby said, it's, you know, as Dale talked about, it's always been passed before. But here's the thing, you know, just the threat of it not happening could hurt the markets. The stock market right now is internally kind of weak. You could see the Dow, which is just a little under 35,000 now. It could drop, you know, 10%, 20% over the next few weeks. I mean, it could go under 30,000. Is that likely? Not necessarily. Is it possible? Yes, it is. Now, how did we get here? Here's what's happened. Mitch McConnell has told the Democrats, look, you have got this huge spending bill, $3.5 trillion. You never came to us. You never asked us, do you want our help? Do we get any input? He said they never asked the Republicans. So here's what Mitch McConnell said at the beginning of August. He said this, let me make something perfectly clear. If they don't want or need our input on this huge spending bill, they won't get our help. So in other words, he's saying you're on your own. And a lot of Democrats, a lot of moderate Democrats don't want to be associated with trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of this spending and future spending. And there's one very interesting point. Mitch McConnell is making the Democrats own up to this. That's his move. Here's a poll that came out recently from Politico in the Morning Consult. It shows that the public would blame, 33% of the public would blame the Democrats if there's a debt default. 16% would blame the Republicans. 42% would blame both parties. So the Democrats would shoulder more of the blame if a debt default were to happen, or even maybe for the debt default negotiations. So, yeah, it could be a political winner for the Republicans. We'll just have to see.
Drew, back to this huge spending bill that the Democrats are trying to get through. I mean, there's no way we could pay for it, so it means it's going to jack the corporate income tax, then it's going to hit the middle class really hard. There's no way you can pay for that stuff, is it?
There isn't, and they're trying to, quote unquote, get to zero. But the fact of the matter is, and we're going to talk more about this in the days ahead, Pat, but you're exactly right, because these corporate income taxes, they always come filtering back down to the middle class one way or the other. Either prices go up, salaries don't go up as much as they should. There are all kinds of ways that it hits the middle class. And the tax raises that they talk about, they never bring as much money as they say they will, and the government programs always cost more, so you're going to have higher deficits, exactly like you said.
Thanks. Well, in other news, a huge crowd came together over the weekend in Georgia. Why? Was it a rock concert? No, it's Donald Trump. CBN's David Prody caught up with the former president to ask him a critical question with a twist. Take a look.
This is an invasion.
The MAGA crowds aren't dwindling. This weekend in Georgia, the former president drew another big audience. They're urging him to run again in 2024. I brought up the subject with a twist.
What will make you not run in 2024? In other words, what would be a reason not to run?
Well, I guess a bad call from a doctor or something, right? You get that call and say, hey, sir, how you doing? Come on down here and see us because we got a bad report, right? So things happen through God. They happen. And, but I feel so good, and I hate what's happening to our country.
Trump has a long list of issues with this administration. After being called the most pro-life president ever, Trump says he's seen the exact opposite approach from this Catholic president.
If you look at his policies and if you look at what he's doing to religion and organized religion, if you look at what's going on, I don't know how the Catholic Church can be supportive of him.
His support among independent voters has seen a drop as well. That's mainly due to the southern border situation, and Trump puts the blame squarely on the current president.
All he had to do is, I say, go to the beach. Just relax, Joe. Go to the beach. We had it the best ever in the history of that border, the southern border. And now it's the worst in history, and it's probably the worst border anywhere in the world, if you think of it, because no border has ever been like what's happening at our border. It's the destruction from inside of our country.
Trump's critics say his unconventional toxicity and lies are responsible for destroying the country, too. The January 6th Congressional Committee wants to see all documents and correspondences that he had on that day in January. Biden's White House is set to forego the traditions of executive privilege and release those records.
It's a disgrace what's going on. This is just another continuation of really, you'd call it the greatest witch hunt in history.
You're going to sue,
and a disgrace.
Will you look at suing them in court? Are you thinking about it?
I'll do whatever is necessary.
He'll also do whatever is necessary to let everyone know that it was his administration who delivered a vaccine in record time. But what about those mandates that have become so controversial? Have they been discriminatory against the unvaccinated in this country?
Since I left, I think people just don't trust the Biden administration or Biden, because since I left, now you have the mandate fight, and that's a big fight, by the way, and you have to allow people their freedoms.
And now the people also wait for a decision from the Donald to see if he's ready to give the presidency another shot.
Well, Chief Political Correspondent David Brody is with us. David, the last campaign was run in large measure against Trump, and he did have a lot of problems with women, especially suburban women. So what do you view his chances in the next election?
Well, Pat, as you know, it's always a base election. And what I mean by that is you got to get out the base. So the Trump campaign, I say the Trump campaign, am I getting ahead of myself? The potential Trump campaign will know that they have to do an even better job of getting out more of those MAGA faithful. But they're also encouraged, a lot of folks in Trump orbit, by this idea that independent support for President Biden has dropped significantly, as we've reported here on the 700 Club, going from 55% among support regarding independence to about 37%. And they're concerned about immigration. They're concerned about, obviously, what's going on at the border. And so when you put that out there, it gives Donald Trump a potential to say, hey, you know what? The time may be right again to run again. We'll see. But it was an interesting answer, for sure, about the bad call from his doctor.
The only reason why he wouldn't run is if his ticker isn't working.
That's right.
David, how do you see Republican chances to take back the Senate and the House in 22?
Well, it's all right there for the taking, Pat, and leave it to the Republicans to blow it. But look, I mean, there's no doubt they only need to flip, what is it, about 5 House seats? I mean, it depends on the special elections that come and go, but it's about 5 House seats right now. And so, look, they've got not only a chance, but they've got a very, very good chance of winning the House. And redistricting has helped them. Let's be honest, Joe Biden and his policies have helped them, as I just pointed out, with the independents sinking. And then, of course, in the Senate, look, there are about 10 toss-up seats, if you will. Pennsylvania, Georgia, those are going to be big ones, Wisconsin as well. The bottom line is Republicans could actually pick up the Senate, too. It'll be a little trickier, but in a climate that seems to be favoring Republicans, I'll tell you what, this could be the last chance for Democrats to pass some of the sweeping legislation that we've been hearing all about in this show and, of course, for weeks and months. And that's why they want to get it done, because they know their time in the majority seems to be potentially running out in 2022.
I think you're exactly right. You know, just focus on Georgia. There were a couple of those races that were kind of squirrely in the last election, and Sonny Perdue, one of those people, ought to come back in. Don't you feel that's the case?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, over the weekend in Georgia, Donald Trump saying out loud at the rally, hey, David Perdue, are you going to run again? Why don't you run again? So he would like to see him do that. Raphael Warnock going to be in some trouble, obviously, in Georgia. That is a tough seat for Democrats to hold on to. But then again, and don't get me started with ballot harvesting and some of the stuff that Stacey Abrams and others are doing down there in Georgia. But I'll tell you what, it's going to be an interesting race in Georgia.
David, thanks so much.